Hey everyone, this is Mike Matsuno, the man in Japan. Since yesterday, June 1st, 2022, up to 20,000 people a day will now be allowed to enter into Japan. But this does not include visitors who come in on a tourist visa, at least not yet. Narita Airport, which I just came through about a month ago, and some of you may have seen this video here, has also waived its PCR test and quarantine requirements for 80% of arrivals. Here's the actual newscast in English from NHK from last night.
Starting today, Japan has raised the cap on the number of daily arrivals from overseas to 20,000. This is accompanied by a significant easing of quarantine measures at airports. We have a report on the hopes and preparations for the recovery of inbound tourism, as well as the outlook for overseas travel by Japanese. Narita Airport, starting today, quarantine measures for entering Japan have been significantly eased. People arriving from low-risk countries can head straight for the immigration control counter without taking an antigen test. With the raising of the upper limit on the number of arrivals from foreign countries, border quarantine measures have also been relaxed. Countries have been categorized into three groups depending on the COVID infection status in each country. The lowest risk countries are shown in blue. People from these 98 countries and regions, including the United States and Britain, are not required to be tested upon arrival. Also not required to self-quarantine for the prescribed period regardless of their vaccination status. People in the yellow group are exempt from testing and self-quarantine if they've received a third dose of the vaccine. Stricter measures will remain in place for arrivals from the four countries shown in red. Health Ministry says about 80% of the arrivals will be eligible for the waiver on testing and self-quarantine. A person returning to Japan from Thailand says it took no time at all to get out of the airport. Before, they had to self-quarantine as long as 1 week, so this time it's so much easier. Starting today, the cap on the number of people arriving in Japan from overseas has been raised to 20,000 per day. The number's around 1/7 of what it was before the pandemic, when daily arrivals counted nearly 140,000. The government plans to consider a further easing of border quarantine measures, keeping a close eye on the infection situation in Japan. Japan's popular tourist sites, many are hoping for the return of foreign tourists. From June 10th, foreign tourists will be allowed back in for the first time in about 2 years. They will be restricted to people from 98 countries and regions who are on group sightseeing tours accompanied by tour conductors.
Developed around Sensoji Temple.
This business that operates sightseeing rickshaws is preparing by providing English conversation training to its employees. For the first time in around 2 years, this souvenir shop has stocked up on items popular with foreign tourists. The shop owner says he welcomes the long-awaited return of foreign tourists. He's very excited. Preparations are being made to encourage foreign tourists to follow anti-COVID protocol. Shrine in Tachinaka City, Ibaraki Prefecture, has been using pictograms to get its message across to foreign visitors who speak neither English nor Japanese. A person from Thailand who visited Oita Prefecture on an experimental program held ahead of the easing of restrictions on foreign tourists was found to be infected. With that case in mind, the shrine will draw up a set of infection control measures appropriate for the number of foreign tourists it will accommodate. Japan travel agency JTB says it's now receiving significantly more inquiries from travel agencies overseas compared to before the pandemic started. Last winter, JTB conducted an online survey asking travel agencies overseas how soon they'd like to resume the sale of tours to Japan. Our reporter points out the amazing 75% of respondents said they'd like to resume sales as soon as Japan lifted entry restrictions. The JTB official agrees. There have even been inquiries from agents from Europe to Asia. Points out the current cap of 20,000 arrivals includes Japanese people returning home, and he's worried the cap may not be high enough to meet the pent-up demand among foreign travellers. He also points out a growing number of foreign tourists appear to be interested in visiting nature areas rather than popular tourist spots that may be crowded. The JTB official says this new trend away from crowded places may be a positive legacy of the pandemic. He says if you're in nature, you don't have to wear a mask and you can feel more relaxed. He says his company is planning to offer new package tours to meet the new demands of foreign tourists. So what's the status of travel restrictions in countries where Japanese tourists have often visited in the past? It depends on countries. For example, China still does not allow the entry of foreign nationals for sightseeing purposes. Australia is allowing in foreign tourists if they can show proof of vaccination. The United States is allowing foreign tourists in principle on condition that they can show proof of vaccination or negative antigen tests.